Hello, it's Katrina at the Sewing Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to make this quilter's wallet. It's made with 40 charm squares and a fat quarter of fabric and some wadding, and it's perfect for keeping your notes in about the measurements for your quilt. You can write those in there. It's got a little pocket to keep your pens, and it's got another little pocket to keep your ruler or templates or papers for paper piecing. So let's get started. So you're going to need your pack of mini charms, or if you want to cut your own fabric, you're going to need 40 2.5-inch squares. And I've already joined these together, and you can see here that I've joined them in 5 going across and 8 rows. So 8 rows of 5, so that's our 40. And then I've done some quilting, and you can see here that I've just done some cross hatching in a grey thread. So that's on a piece of scrap wadding. So I've done that piece already. The next thing you're going to need to do is to cut your fat quarter, which is your lining piece. You're going to need to cut your strips, which form the lining here, here and here. And that is 3 strips, because we need to make the pockets for our notebook to go in, and the pocket here, we're going to put those on afterwards. So we're creating the whole lining now. So we need our strips measure 6.5 by 10.5. So we've got 2 pieces measuring 6.5 by 10.5. That's this background here and here. And then we've got another one which is 10.5 by, let me just double check it, 4.5. And that is our piece for there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the pocket that this notebook slides into. So if I just show you, I think if I show you over here, you might be able to see it a bit closer. That's this pocket here, and that's perfect for popping our notebook inside. So we're going to make that by having a strip of fabric. Now this strip of fabric measures 16 inches by 6.5 inches, and I've put some heavyweight Vilene on the back, which I'm going to iron in a moment. And for this pocket here, you can see that I've chosen a different fabric to my background fabric, and this piece measures 10 inches by 6.5, and I'm going to put some iron-on Vilene on the back of that. So I'm just going over to the iron to do that. So I'm going to put the shiny side down on the reverse of my fabric, and I'm just going to iron that on. And that's going to make the pocket nice and firm. Give that a good press. And then I'm going to fold it in half, wrong sides together. So I'm just going to press that again. So I'm pressing it in half, and I'm going to do the same with the other pocket. And again, I'm going to press that in half. So this forms the pocket that the notepad is going to go into, and this forms the pocket that your ruler and your template are going to go into. And you can see that I've already put a little decoration here. So I've just fussy cut this flower. Move it over to this camera. I've fussy cut this flower here into a heart, which I've attached with bond web, and now would be the time to sew that on before you actually close your pocket. So now would be the time to just go round and stitch that in place before you attach your pocket. So we've now got our pieces here that form our lining for this. So I'm going to pin these in place. So I'm going to take this piece of lining, which is this one, and I'm going to put it right sides together over my background and my pocket. And as a little tip, you might want to just stitch this to this piece down here using a scant 1/8 of an inch, because that just holds it in place while you're adding this, and it makes it a bit easier. But for the purposes of today, I'm just going to sew it down and hope that I manage to catch it all in. But if you're doing it at home, you probably want to just baste that in place first. It just makes your life that little bit easier. I am just going to sew this one down here to hold this, because that now needs to be stitched to that, and I'm dealing with 4 bits of fabric and I want them to all stay still. So I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to come back over and pin it. So you can see that I've just attached that about 1/8 of an inch. If I show you up here, you can see I've just gone down there to hold that, because that is now going on the front of this one. So I've got all my pieces together. So I'm just going to pop a pin in there. Another one there. So I'm now going to go back to the machine, and I'm going to sew down both sides to hold these pieces in place. So now I'm going to sew the seam using a 1/4 of an inch seam, so that I hide that stitching inside that I've just basted it onto the pocket with. And now I'm going to sew down the other side. Right, so I've just stopped there because it's moved ever so slightly. So I'm going to go back and just stitch over it. It's just moved out of the 1/4 of an inch because I'm sewing through the extra layers. So I'm just going back over to line it back up again. And I'm going to go back to the middle and show you how that's worked. So you can see that we've got our centre pocket and then our side pocket there, which is going to be sewn down. That will be caught into the side seam in a moment. So I'm just going to press these back. So I'm going back over to the iron. Just pressing those seams. And then we're going to assemble it. So we take our lovely quilted back, which is this bit here. So we put that right sides together and just line it up. And then I'm going to pin these together, or you could use binding clips if you've got binding clips. Just pin these together, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a gap for turning, but I'm going to leave the gap on the side where our button or our popper goes. I'm not going to leave the gap here because it will interfere with this pocket, or along the bottom it will interfere. So I tend to leave a gap at the side where I know my popper's going to go, or you could leave a gap at the top if you wanted to turn it through. I'm just going to check that I've caught that in all the way round. And now I'm going back to the machine and I'm going to put my walking foot on because we're sewing through lots more bulk this time. So I've just popped my walking foot on and I'm going to start where I'm going to have my gap. So I'm going to leave a gap here. So I'm just going to start a little way down and I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch seam all the way round. Just going to check that I've caught the fabric in all the way round, and then I'm going to snip off the corners and turn it all the way through. So I'm just going to snip off the corners and then I'm going to turn it through, and this is where we keep our fingers crossed. It takes a little while because you've got the bulk of the wadding and the viling. And there we have it, turned all the way through. So your next job would be to give it a good press. And then you would top stitch it closed. So you would fold this in here and then you would top stitch all the way around as I've done on this one. So you can see, let me pop it under this camera, so you can see here that I've top stitched really near to the edge all the way around. And that's what you would do with this one. You would top stitch it all the way around and then you would press it again. And then you could decide whether you wanted to put a button on it or whether you wanted to put a popper, or you could just put a ribbon around it with a big button that you can wrap around, and then the ribbon closes your pouch closed. So now you can pop all your bits and pieces inside, so you can put your notebook in and you can put your ruler or your template, and then you can put your pens. And I've just realised that I should have done this stitch line before I assembled the lining. So when you come to make it, don't do what I've just done. The time to do the line, that's if you want a pen holder. You might not want a pen holder, you might just want a bigger pocket. But the time to do it would be before you assemble these 3 pieces. So when you've got just this pocket on this piece of background, make sure you sew a little line, as I've done on this one, so you can pop your pens in. And that's how you make the Quilters wallet. So, as always, have fun, make it your own, and I look forward to seeing you next time here in the sewing studio.